So let's jump right into this. We're talking about World War I, a massive, world-changing conflict. And the big question we're trying to answer is, how does a single assassination lead to a war that involves millions of people all across the globe?
Exactly. It seems impossible, right? But what we're going to do is look at the four big underlying causes that were already there. Think of them like piles of dry wood. Then we'll look at the spark that lit the fire, and finally, how new technology made that fire so incredibly destructive.
So it's not just about the one event, but about everything that was already set up ready to explode. Let's start with those four deep causes. I know historians often use the acronym MAIN to remember them.
That's right. And EMA stands for militarism. Before 1914, the major European powers were in a full-blown arms race. They were all convinced that the only way to stay safe was to have a bigger, stronger army and navy than their neighbors.
And the naval race between Great Britain and Germany is a perfect example of this, isn't it? Germany starts building this huge fleet of battleships, really trying to challenge Britain's control of the seas.
Absolutely. And Britain's response was dramatic. In 1906, they launched the HMS Dreadnought. And this wasn't just a new ship. It was a complete game changer. It was faster, and it was built around this all-big gun idea, making every other battleship in the world instantly obsolete.
Wow, so one ship just reset the entire game. If you were Germany, your whole fleet was suddenly second rate. You had to start over.
You had to, and it was incredibly expensive. Now, while they were competing at sea, countries like France and Russia were building up massive armies on land using mandatory military service. But the real danger wasn't just the size of the armies. It was their plans.
What do you mean their plans? Like how to attack?
More like how to get ready to attack.
Yeah.
They had these super detailed, really rigid mobilization timetables. Everything was planned out to the minute which troops get on which train at what time. Once you started that process, you couldn't just stop it.
So hitting the mobilize button was basically the same as declaring war. It took the decision away from the politicians.
Precisely. The military logic just took over. And that leads us straight into the MAIN, the alliance system.
The secret treaties. This web of alliances that was supposed to keep the peace.
It was supposed to create a balance of power. The idea was that no one would start a war if they knew they'd have to fight half of Europe. You had two main teams, the Triple Entente, which is Great Britain, France, and Russia.
And on the other side was the Triple Alliance. Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Italy. So the problem was, if any two countries got into a fight, everyone else was contractually obligated to jump in.
Yes. It turned a small local conflict into a guaranteed world war. The system designed to prevent a big war actually made it inevitable. So now we have huge armies and a system that ties them all together. But what were they competing for? That brings us to imperialism.
Right, the scramble for colonies. European powers were all competing for territory and resources in Africa and Asia. Britain had this enormous global empire, which gave them huge wealth and power.
And Germany, which was a much newer country, felt like it had missed out. They wanted their place in the sun, as their leader, Kaiser Wilhelm, said. This wasn't just about, getting rubber or oil. It was a matter of national pride and prestige.
So they were bumping into each other all over the globe in places like Morocco, right? These little disputes that almost started the war even earlier.
Exactly. The tension over colonies was incredibly high, which sets up the final deep cause, and for nationalism.
This is that intense belief that your country, your ethnic group, is the best, and it was running rampant.
In new countries like Germany, it created a huge sense of pride and ambition. But in older empires like Austria-Hungary, it was a massive problem. Austria-Hungary was made up of many different ethnic groups, Slavs, Hungarians, Czechs, and so on.
And those groups were starting to demand their own independent countries. They wanted self-determination.
Yes, and that threatened to tear the whole empire apart from the inside. At the same time, you had this powerful sense of nationalism where people were willing to fight and die just to prove their country was the strongest. In France, for example, there was this deep-seated desire for revenge against Germany to get back the territories of Alsace and Lorraine that they had lost decades earlier.
Okay, so the whole continent is a powder keg. We have militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism all creating this incredible pressure. So where's the match? Where does the spark finally happen?
The spark happens in the most unstable part of Europe, the Balkans. It was called the powder keg of Europe for a reason.
And why was it so volatile?
Well, the Ottoman Empire, which had controlled the area for centuries, was getting weaker. This created a power vacuum. And the Kingdom of Serbia had big plans. They wanted to unite all the Slavic people in the region into one big Slavic nation.
Which would be a direct threat to their neighbor, the Austro-Hungarian Empire.
A huge threat. Austria-Hungary already ruled over millions of Slavs. If Serbia succeeded, their own empire could just dissolve. And to make it more complicated, Russia saw itself as the big brother and protector of Serbia. So Austria-Hungary was desperate to crush Serbian nationalism before it was too late.
And they get their chance on June 28, 1914, in the city of Sarajevo.
That's the day. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, who was the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, is visiting the city with his wife Sophie, and a young Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip assassinates them both.
Princip was part of the secret group, right? The Black Hand.
He was. Their goal was to free Slavs from Austrian rule, and for Austria-Hungary, this assassination was the perfect excuse. They believed the Serbian government was behind it, and it gave them the justification they needed to finally go to war with Serbia.
So that single event triggers what's called the July Crisis, a month of pure diplomatic chaos.
It does. Austria-Hungary goes to its powerful ally, Germany, and gets what historians call a blank check, basically, a promise of unconditional support no matter what they do. With that guarantee, Austria-Hungary sends Serbia a harsh ultimatum, a list of demands so strict that no independent country could ever agree to all of them.
But Serbia actually tried to, didn't they? They agreed to most of the points.
They did, in a last-ditch effort to avoid war. But it didn't matter. Austria-Hungary wanted a war, and on July 28, 1914, they declared one on Serbia. And then the dominoes start to fall. The alliance system kicks in.
Right. Russia, Serbia's ally, starts to mobilize its massive army. The military timetables are now ticking.
Germany sees this and warns Russia to stop. When Russia refuses, Germany declares war on Russia. That's August 1st. Then France, Russia's ally, begins to mobilize.
Which forces Germany to launch its master plan for a two-front war. The Schlieffen Plan.
A huge, risky gamble. The idea was to knock France out of the war quickly before Russia's giant but slow-moving army was fully ready. To do that, they planned to invade France by sweeping through neutral Belgium.
And violating Belgium's neutrality is what finally pulls Great Britain into the war.
It is. Britain had an old treaty from 1839 guaranteeing Belgium's safety. When German troops crossed the border, Britain demanded they withdraw, Germany refused, and on August 4th, Britain declared war.
And for Britain, it wasn't just about a treaty. It was about the balance of power. They couldn't let Germany dominate all of Europe. With Britain and its vast empire now in the fight, this was officially a world war.
Absolutely. But the war that everyone thought would be over in a few months turned into something else entirely. It became the first great industrial war.
Meaning that modern factories were now a huge part of the war effort.
A central part. Factories were churning out millions of rifles, artillery shells, and a machine gun. The machine gun completely changed warfare. It made charging across open ground basically a death sentence.
And that's what led to the stalemate of trench warfare, right? Both sides just digging in.
Yes, hundreds of miles of trenches stretching across France and Belgium. And to try and break that stalemate, they invented horrifying new weapons. Poisonous gases like chlorine and mustard gas were developed, and the first clunky tanks were sent over no man's land.
You also have airplanes being used for the first time, mostly to spot for the artillery down below.
Right. And railroads moved troops and supplies faster than ever before. All this technology just made the scale of death and destruction unlike anything the world had ever seen. And to fuel this industrial killing machine, the war had to become what we call a total war.
What does that actually mean for people back home?
It means everyone is part of the war effort, not just soldiers. Governments took over their national economies. Factories stopped making cars and started making weapons. Food and fuel were rationed so the army could have enough.
And women's roles changed dramatically.
Yeah.
They entered the workforce in huge numbers, building shells in factories or driving ambulances.
It was a massive social shift. And to keep everyone motivated and unified, governments used a lot of propaganda. Posters and newsreels were used to boost morale and, frankly, to demonize the enemy. The war even came home directly, with blockades causing food shortages and the first aerial bombings of cities.
And by 1917, you have soldiers fighting from all over the world. From India, Canada, Australia.
And battles were happening not just in Europe, but in the Middle East, in Africa, and on the oceans. But the big game changer was the United States entering the war in 1917. They brought fresh troops and, crucially, massive economic power.
So by the end, in 1918, the world is a completely different place. Entire empires, the German, the Russian, the Austro-Hungarian, the Ottoman, they're just gone. The map of Europe is redrawn.
And millions of people are dead. The war left these deep, permanent scars on everyone and everything it touched.
So when you pull it all together, the war wasn't caused by just one thing. It was this perfect storm of pride, fear, military plans, and these tangled treaties. All of it meant that one act of violence was guaranteed to become a global catastrophe.
That's it. Understanding how those forces, militarism, alliances, imperialism, and nationalism can create such instability is why this history is still so important today. Good luck with your studies.